Ma'am, before we start, on behalf of the OD cohort, we wish you a very happy Teachers' Day. Related wishes. And I would like to invite Ananya to give a short intro about Dr. Anita to the batch. Ananya, if you may please.
Good afternoon, Dr. Anita and my dear friends. Please join me to welcome Dr. Anita, who is Managing Director of Open Spaces Consulting in Mumbai. She coaches CEOs, senior executives, women leaders, and professionals who face significant challenges navigating fast changing environments. She has coached over 15 years and professionally for the last 7 years. In her 33 years of professional practice, she has conducted 300 workshops and done over 900 hours of coaching and has worked in DCM Group's SRF Limited and FMCG major Marico Industries. Her work in academia includes tenure as Dean of NMIMS University and SP Jain Center of Management in Singapore and Dubai. She is a recipient of the British Chevening Scholarship from the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office. She is accredited in the usage of Leadership Circle, MBTI, FIRO-B, Thomas Profiling, Belbin team roles, Hogan Assessments, Ericsson Coaching Framework, and also she is an SHRM Master Trainer and is a fellow of Sumedha's Academy of Human Context. She has served the management consulting profession as chairperson of the International Council of Management Consulting Institutes, which has a presence over 50 countries, and earlier as president of Institute of Management of Consultants of India. She believes that self-reflexivity and self-realization during COVID times is very helpful, and listening to our voice inside and acting from within. We are so thrilled to have you, ma'am, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Ananya. Thank you, Bharat, for inviting me here. And thank you to TISS for providing this opportunity as well. I decided during COVID times, I'm not going to go out there and push my case. I'm just going to leave the door open and see what comes in, and what lovely invites I've been getting. And this is definitely a highlight, because this is not just another class to do. This is a master class. And I love master classes. I do believe in the terminology of it, like it or not. Otherwise, somebody may treat a master class like a workshop, or may treat a master class like just another lecture. But I want to treat a master class like a master class. And a master class is somewhere where some specialized knowledge or specialized kind of topic or experience is taken up and then exemplified. Someone who's mastered that particular subject. So I'm here to talk to you on one of my favorite subjects, although it is not that popular a subject. You know, usually there's a lot of popularity, popular subjects like, agile computing and balanced scorecard and all the new interventions that are coming in. So although it's not a very popular subject, but I was telling Bharat when we were discussing the subject options as to do you want a classical music or you want popular music? If you go for popular music, you'll get rock and pop and all the metal and all the other stuff. It's lovely. I enjoy some of that music even today. But it's different. It's very popular. It gives everybody, instant pleasure. But if you look at classical music, it takes a little discerning eye to understand, and it takes a little bit of listening a few times before you realize its true value. And I was surprised to see an ad the other day, which was the Justin Bieber song on "I'm in Love with the Shape of You" is actually based on Rag Bhimpalasi. And not many people know that. And the Rag Bhimpalasi is the most romantic rag in all the Indian classical musics. So even today, what I'm going to talk about in role clarification, role clarity, role efficacy, you will find when you go to work in organization, nobody's going to say the words role clarity and role efficacy. Were not very popular. But in almost everything every OD initiative that you might initiate, you will see shades of what we are going to cover today. You will see a lot of shades of what we covered today. And part of my lecture is also going to focus on that aspect. So of what is it in modern day interventions that reflects the basic fundamentals that we are going to learn today. So, so it's a classical topic, and whatever knowledge you gain here today is something that's going to, if you choose to, is something that will hold you in good stead for the rest of your career. And no matter what the fashion of the day is, no matter what, whether you're singing Justin Bieber or you're singing, Daler Mehndi or whoever the latest guy is, doesn't matter what your latest intervention, you'll still see shades of needing to provide role clarity, needing to provide role efficacy in organizations. So that's the importance of the class today. So that's why I'm glad to do a master class, and some of the lessons I learned in my life were, I'm a graduate of psychology, and first day, first lecture in general psychology, I still repeat some of that today because I still see shades of all that in everything I do now, in all the work that I do. So I do believe going back to the classical textbook and the roots are very important. Otherwise, we don't make sense and it's not coherent beyond a point. So I'm also taking one little caveat, and that it is now almost more than 10 years since I quit teaching, and I decided to not teach anymore. I had been saturated with that. So it's more than 10 years, but that doesn't mean my quest for knowledge is any less. But why I'm saying that is I'm a teacher from the old school. I'm a chalk and talk person. Literally when I started teaching, we used to use a chalk and a blackboard. Now you don't see that anymore. You see whiteboards at least. But I'm a chalk and talk person, as in, like, I have my points to cover, but I like to just use the blackboard to jot down my bullet points, but let it flow. So I find PowerPoints very constraining in that sense, because in PowerPoints, I have to pre-think everything. I have to freeze my thinking. I have to put it down in bullet points, and then I have to be the slave of that bullet point and the slave of the next bullet point. So I have to stick to that script. So I, especially with a topic like this, it was not easy for me to put everything down in a bullet point. So our lectures for 1.5 hours, we're already 10 minutes through. So even if we go over by 10-15 minutes, I hope it'll be okay by you. If it's not, then just feel free. The recording will be there. If you like, I'll upload it and share the link. You can, you can leave and you can see the rest of it later. So I'm already taking these 2 caveats from my side. We'll try and reserve the question and answer for later, because if I keep looking at the chat box, I might, not be able to focus on what I have to say next. So.
Now let's start.
Okay, thanks for pointing it out. We'll try and fill in the balance. So the metaphor of organizations is, there are 4 different metaphors. One is that of a machine, one is that of a family, one is that of a marketplace, and one is that of an organic community or a tribe. Now, we prefer, as OD professionals, we prefer to look at the organization as a full community. Because if you look at it from any one of the points of view, then you will get an incomplete perspective. So if you look at it purely as a wealth generating machine, it will be incomplete, because then everything the OD manager will do will be geared to optimizing the wealth or maximizing the wealth. If you look at it purely as a family, then it will be very loosely held processes and very loosely held guidelines. And if you look at it as a marketplace, then it gets very transactional and very negotiation oriented. But if you look at it as a tribe, there's elements of all the other. The tribe has to be self-sustaining like a machine. The tribe has to have relationships like a family. The tribe has to be sustainable in the marketplace as well. And there is much more to it. There's culture, there's values, there's system and process in a tribe. I'll quickly go through this, but it's also important for an OD manager to understand that human behavior is not something, it's fairly complex and it's also fairly simple. But you cannot have a cause and effect logical reasoning when it comes to human behavior. It's not like a software program, and even artificial intelligence is nowhere close to human intelligence. So there are many things that cause human behavior. And I'll begin with, first, there are cosmological laws, which means there is a larger truth and a larger reason why we come into the world. There are cosmological. Some people talk about horoscope, some people talk about reason for living, some people, but everyone has a belief that there is a cosmic reality behind our existence. And I do believe that it's important for us to try and tap into data from the cosmos to understand ourselves more fully. That's why some of you might have noticed in my profile that we also do some degree of understanding human behavior through tarot cards as well. That's where I get data from here about the person. Then we all have some existential identity codings, which are very deep level codings of personality inside us, which we are born with, which are innate, inborn preferences. So those of you who know, we write with our right hand. Some people write with their left hand. You can't change that. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just that it's very deeply encoded in our minds, which hand will be the dominant. So there are innate, inborn preferences of behavior. And those are existential identity codings that we are born with. And then there is the interpersonal interface, which is the people we interact with, the family values, the culture, the country, the region, religion. All these things have an impact on our human behavior. Primary systems, that's your family, parents, what kind of relatedness you have with them, what kind of personalities they have, siblings, order of birth, all that determines our firstborn, the lastborn, the middle child. The groups that we interact with, social interface, that determines our behavior. Secondary systems that we create, so it could be systems like work organizations that we create, our living spaces. Or when we get married, we have children, we create families of our own. Or we have hobby groups or support groups that we operate in, social networks we build for ourselves. So these are all secondary systems. And lastly is the cultural interface. So whatever culture that I belong to, modern, Indian, ethnographic, whatever, there's so many determinants of culture. These all determine human behavior. So with that as a basic understanding, I want to now get into the domain of role dynamics. What happens in organizations? Now, a very classical way of looking at an organization is actually, I tried to put 3 interlocking circles, but I couldn't find the appropriate smart chart to do it on PowerPoint. But this is supposed to be like 3 interlocking circles. Okay, so just visualize it as 3 interlocking circles. It's people and relationships form a part of any organization. I mean, then there is structures and processes. So there's a hierarchy and a structure, reporting relationships, role linkages, blah, blah, blah. All that is part of the processes, how the data flows, how information flows, how work flows, how you can indent for resources and how you can use those resources, rules, regulations, guidelines, the structures and process of organizations. Then there is the culture. Whatever is the culture of the organization. Every typical organization have typical cultures, and culture is like a flowing river. It's not static in definition. It's not like once you define it, it's done. A culture is something that's like a river that flows. So every time you try and understand culture, it's flowed on and something is more. It's an evolving yin yang, whatever mix of values, visions, missions, people, ways of doing things, and ways, taboos, cultural celebrations, everything, like in a tribe. Okay, so culture. Typically, and the intersecting point and the integrating point, the point at which actually the purpose of organizations get fulfilled is the role. It's the roles that people play. So it's like the whole life is a stage, and people play different roles in different times. This typical Shakespeare narrative. So the intersection of people, how they take on the structure and the culture of the organization, the intersecting and integrating point. And this is where performance happens. In the role, the performance happens. In the role, people take the organization purpose forward. In the role, the people meet their purpose objectives of their own and the others in the organization. So any OD perspective that looks at only one is inadequate. If I say I'm going to do culture building exercise, let's focus on values, vision, mission. Okay, but what about the people, structure, and process? Okay, if I say I'm only going to work with people and let's talk about building relationships in the organization. Okay, what will happen to the structure and process? If I say let's only, and this is a fallacy because today now with IT and everything being digitized, everyone thinks the process is a solution to every OD issue, and digitization is the only OD journey that we have to go. But yes, digitization is a great enabler, and without digitization we wouldn't be anywhere today. But it's not the process, it's how the process lives in the hearts of people, it's how the process lives in the culture of the organization, and it's how the process enables the roles of the organization. So all these are important to any OD intervention to work, any OD intervention. So if you are looking at any OD intervention, even like agile computing, it's only focusing here. And where are people in culture? So I don't know enough about the current modern days to be able to judge or make an assessment unless I know more. But any OD intervention, and I've been around more than, it's about 39 years in working life. And I find that when we started off, I'm an 81 graduate of XLRI. When we started off, it was all about Kepner-Trego and the rational manager. But today, what we're calling design thinking is nothing but the same one, only with a few more frills and bells and whistles, it's the same old wine and new bottles with new labels, but you have added a little flavor of modernity and different words and different jargon. So there are there are fashions and fads of the day, and I've seen many fads come and go. And I know that those fads are very important because those fads bring buy-in in the organizations. If you're doing something that is current and endorsed by a larger community, it's very important to follow the fashion and the fad of the day. If you don't, then your initiatives are likely to fall flat. So it's very important to follow the fashion of the day, but it's also important to understand that if any fashion or any fad or any OD intervention does not meet these criteria, then it is likely to fail. So this is the importance of organizational roles. A little bit more of understanding what is the role. If I asked you, what's your role as a student? You will say my job is to study and learn and graduate and get a degree. Well, I think many of you are playing a role beyond that. You're playing a role. You're contributing to the institution of TISS. Okay, you're contributing to the build-up of knowledge in that. You're contributing to the culture of the institute. You're contributing to faculty. Faculty learns from you. You learn from the faculty. So we are creating change all the time. Each one of us, we are being impacted by change, but we're also creating change at the same time. So it's important to understand the role is something that is being impacted on a daily basis and is also being created on a daily basis. Ultimately, the role that I will play towards the end of my life will be very different from the role I'm playing today. So just a little bit of is not analysis here. Work is a performance or an activity. Office or position is a specific point in organization structure. Okay, so I'm a general manager, or I'm an executive director, I'm a vice president, or I'm a junior executive, or I'm an assistant manager. A role is a set of obligations generated by others. So there are stakeholders for every position, and what are their expectations from me? What are the expectations of the system, the organizations from my job? And that net set of obligations is called a role. Okay, the role is not in here, the role is out there. I as an individual have my own personality and my own needs, but how I would engage with that role will determine the role efficacy. But right now we're just understanding. A job is not a role, so a job description is not a role description. In fact, roles are difficult to even describe. They're only held within specific requirement to achieve an objective. It clarifies a lot. A job description clarifies a lot of my role. Okay, whatever are the requirements in terms of qualifications, in terms of competencies, in terms of deliverables, in terms of reporting relationships and dimensions, those are all aspects of job descriptions. A function is a group of behaviors expected from a role. So what's the function? You're a sales function and you're a sales and you're managing a territory. So a group of behaviors expected from that role. And a task is a specific activity. Some of the concepts, and it's important to understand this, is role versus position. I occupy a position in an organization and I may be a manager in charge of human resources or organization development of an organization. The role is what role I play while in that position. A role space. Role space is the entire set of roles. So I as a human being, I'm a student, I'm a coordinator, I'm a placement coordinator, I'm a son or a daughter to my parents, I'm a commuter on the train, I'm a part of my community. There's a role I play when it comes to community commitments, family commitments. So I play multiple, there's a whole space around me and there are different roles that I play in different interfaces. That is role. A role set is the net set of all the roles that an individual plays. So you think you're hiring a HR manager, you think you're hiring a finance manager, but this HR manager is not just an HR manager. He's also a father, or if it's a she, she's also a daughter or a father or a sister or a brother or a mother or a thinker or a writer or a actor or so many, or a photographer, depending upon. So there's so many. So the whole set of roles an individual plays needs to be understood so that you understand how the organizational part of the roles can be made more efficacious. Then there is role conflict. Sometimes there are conflicting roles. Classical conflicting role is that women, when they get married, they have babies, and they're asked to come to work, they've got only 24 hours a day. The child is crying for them, and they're expected to deliver on the job as well. A classical conflict of roles. Sometimes there are different kinds of conflicts, and one needs to be aware that a person is playing a role, but he's in intrinsic conflict with himself. He's got to adjust to that conflict or resolve that conflict in some way. And other dimensions of role conflict is inter-role distance. Is that, okay, if I'm a mother and a manager at work, then what is the distance between the two roles? Our two roles are too conflicting. But if I'm a mother and I'm working from home or lady, then the role conflicts are different. And intra-role distance, which is within the role conflict. So within the role, so as a mother, or as a parent, as a new parent, I have some duties to discharge. But today I wanted to make an extra special meal for my family, but I'm now busy with the baby and I can't handle any of that. So within the same role, there is some distances within the role. Then there's role satisfaction, the extent to which I get satisfaction in doing the roles. Then there are role linkages in an organization. Suppose I'm an HR person, I cannot discharge my role unless I've interacted with maybe my stakeholders, could be in finance, marketing, or it could be in sales or in any other function. Or there's a boss I have and there's a team that works with me, or there's some outside external vendors. So these are all role linkages, and I cannot operate independently as an individual. The role linkages are important. And then there are role interfaces. So in my particular one role as an HR manager, what are my various role interfaces? I will, towards the end of the show, I will have one map of one sample role interface. And then these are the dynamics. Those are some of the definitions. These are some of the dynamics. So role efficacy is what? Role efficacy is the potential effectiveness of that role. So tomorrow you're going to be an OD manager in an organization. What is the potential to be effective in that? You need to understand lots of things. We'll understand what are the dynamics of increasing role efficacy. Role effectiveness is just getting the role to produce the outcomes that is expected of it. Whereas role efficacy is potential. So I may be, so for example, you know, in one organization I was working with, there was this was pharmaceutical company, and there were medical representatives, or what we call pharmaceutical sales officers. And this particular PSO, he had a lot of trouble in his workplace. He got into scraps with his, you know, with some of the vendors, with some of the doctors in his territory, and generally it wasn't working well for him. And but everyone said, oh, this guy's got a lot of potential, and he's potentially a very good guy. There's just something that's not working for him. So they moved him out of Jalandhar and transferred him into Kanpur. And in Kanpur, he was a top performer. Within a year, he got the awards for the high performing, pharmaceutical sales officer. So the point I'm trying to make is that he was not very effective in that role, but it took somebody perceptive to say there is potential role effectiveness here. And there's something in the context, and there was a certain dynamic in the politics of the situation that didn't work for him. And if we take him out of this context, we find a context more suitable for him, it will work for him. So we placed him in a different context, and it worked beautifully, and his potential role effectiveness was completely enhanced. So role efficacy is what we need to build. There's something called role making and role taking. So when you join your first job, or some of you with work experience, a second or maybe a third job, when you go out from this campus and take on a job, you will be given a role. You say, okay, HR expects you to do this, finance expects you to do this, and your boss expects you to do this, and this. There's role taking. So you'll end up taking a role. Initially, when you get in, especially when you're younger, you're taking a role. You're taking. Okay, what am I supposed to do now? Okay, these are my deliverables. Okay, these are the values we will work with, or this is the culture of the organization. This works and this doesn't work. So you're taking a role. But then beyond a point, once you get into middle management and beyond that, you will think that, hey, there's something I can add value. There's something of mine. I will make my role for myself. I will make a role. I will add myself to the role, and that's called role making. And then there's self-role integration, which means to what extent it sits well with me, within my being, my psyche, my meaning, my purpose in life. And I know a lot of people, you know, after doing engineering and IT engineering particularly, when they got admission into engineering, they went to the Mandir, Masjid and church, and they thanked the God for getting that admission. They distributed sweets around, and I got admission in engineering, and, you know, celebrations. And they spent good number of years getting that degree, engineering degree, and they go to work in an IT organization. And they told, here, do this coding, or here, do this job. And they say, no, but this is not me. This is not me. I don't like it. And believe me, almost, I would say 50 to 60%, maybe more, I'm taking a very conservative estimate, of the IT engineers move away from IT engineering after the first couple of years of working there. So much invested in that, because their self and role integration was, as a student, they loved the subject. We did the subject we liked. As a student, we competed, we got that admission. But when they went on the job, the integration with our sense of purpose, our sense of meaning, our sense of satisfaction, our sense of who we are. And so we got into the self-role integration was missing. So that's the biggest factor, that when we hire people, we must look at self-role integration. To what extent there's a sense of purpose, and how deeply is that purpose anchored in the heart of the person and the being of the person and who he is, and defines who he is. Then there is proactivity, as in how much. Some people are very laid back and they say, I'll only do as I'm told, and I'm doing everything as expected, I'm meeting all expectations. And there's something called creativity, which means I create my own role. Then there's role centering, a sense of centrality that my role is important and it's at the center of certain deliverables and purposes. And I've got, if I don't do my role, then my team will fall flat or the organization will fall flat and I will be missed very desperately. So that's called centrality. Then there is influence. Influence is the extent to which I feel the power to influence my stakeholders in the discharging of my role. And there has to be a sense of personal growth, which means that in this role I will learn and I will move forward, I'll contribute, I'll move further along the path of my own personal and my career growth. Then there are linkings, because a lot depends. Suppose I've been brought up in a family where there's been very strong authority figures. My father was very strong on discipline, or my mother was very strong on discipline, and I learned to toe the line. Or I didn't learn to toe the line, I rebelled. So depending upon my innate, inborn, tendencies and learned tendencies, the way I will react to role linkages will be completely individual to individual people. And so in role linking, it's important to understand inter-role linkages. So for example, many HR people say, oh, this guy is a chartered accountant and he'll behave very transactionally with me, I know. Now, if I've got that orientation or that mindset towards chartered accountant, then the linkage with the finance department is going to take on that flavor. So it's important to know the person before we put him into a job. And then to what extent my role helps me be of help and assistance to others, because there is such a lot of interdependencies in an organization where, if the interdependencies are not met, then if I hang on to my information, I say, I'm not going to share this information with the other person, let him go to hell. And that person is unable to discharge his role because I did not share the information with him, then it's not seen as a helping. So every person must have a helping nature. I must mutually help other people in my team and across teams to discharge their roles as well. It's also role linking is important, because interdependency is the name of the game in any HR or any organization. And superordination. Superordination is something called neurological levels, if I've ever learned of it, which means that you simply, it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. To move up the ladder on neurological levels. So if you like, we can do another lesson only on neurological levels someday, but that's one full lecture on its own. What can be done to improve role efficacy, especially when it comes to role making and role taking? So in self-role integration, you work with employees and subordinates to redesign their roles so that their strengths can be utilized. So you'll see these conversations happening in organizations between bosses and subordinates. There's some interventions designed like Strengths Quest and, or so many assessment centers that get done to identify your strengths and let's capitalize on those. So the self-role integration increases. If I'm good at doing something and my boss recognizes and assigns me tasks which are in line with my strengths and assigns me work then my role is better discharged. Sometimes we recommend moving misfit employees to a job which can. Now, one of the purposes of OD is, we are told, is to increase job role fit. Job person fit. To increase the job and person fit. And when we hire people, when we recruit, place people, when we promote people, when we assess people, the whole idea is to improve the job person fit. So if a person is not fitting into his current role, he's not doing well in a particular, you move into a place where his assets can be better used. Everyone has assets. And increasing job person fit. I'm sure as OD people, you must have heard a lot about job person fit. And so many things that people do to improve job person fit. To increase proactivity, you can minimize the supervision of subordinates and encourage them to ask for help when they need it. Okay, so it, you know, a lot of times people hesitate in asking for help. And you can reward some initiative. If a person has gone ahead out of his way to do something that was not expected, beyond the call of duty, we always say, this person has gone beyond the call of duty. You reward that initiative. That person has taken initiative, let's reward them and say, ah, shabash, very good. You know, motivate and support. You know, recognize in other material ways as well, process ways as well, process-driven ways as well. You listen to employees, respect their views, use wherever possible. So today is more and more the millennium and the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha now is coming out. I don't know if you guys are Gen Alpha or what, but maybe you're Gen Z. Gen Alpha is my grandson who's in the room next door. So that is Gen Alpha. And someone said, no, after Gen Z, what comes after Generation Z? What comes after Z? Nothing comes after Z. So you have to begin all over again. I say Alpha Gen. These are all terms. These are nice terms. I like using these terms. So reward the initiative, listen to their millennial and the Gen Z point of views, respect their views, use these more inclusive climates, not hierarchical, not behave in a bossy manner. Everyone knows that. And employees need to be encouraged to visit other organizations to benchmark what they're doing. It will be wonderful if, you know, and that's why networking forums are created. So one of the best social capital you're building even now is if there are 52 people in class, the 52 of you will create a strong cohort support system. So you may be working in 52 different organizations, but you know, you can easily count on each other to understand what each other is doing and learn from that too. So you can increase creativity. There are lots of initiatives to increase creativity. So I'm just going to read through this very fast. Encourage employees to come up with ideas. Create a climate where there's no fear of being criticized. Appreciate and use new ideas. And also to reward suggestions to solve problems and many other ways to improve creativity on the job. You want to improve role centering? These are some of the things you can do. And you'll see now in this shades of stuff that is available in many OD interventions. So in the previous slide, for example, when you say, listen to employees, respect their views, all the diversity and inclusion initiatives, they come in here. So to increase centrality, you have to communicate the importance of roles to employees. So in the performance discussions, you have to tell them that if your role is very vital to this organization and very important, don't make them feel like they don't matter or what they do doesn't matter, you know. Communicate the importance of roles as perceived by others. Give freedom to employees to set goals and action plans. Now this is becoming more true, that goals are not given, but they are set. And there's a lot of debate about this because then, you know, sometimes they say, no, goals are all set at the top and then they cascade down. But we say, no, on the top, we just simply put down the thrust areas and the important things that we have to look at strategically. Let everyone set their goal in accordingly. That's how I've implemented performance appraisal in many organizations. Some companies that I worked with didn't have their own organizational goals yet. They hadn't put in a strategic planning process. So I simply sat down and we set some thrust areas for the year and we looked at what was important and what was not important for the company. Okay, let's focus on, say, cost consciousness for this year. The profits are under a squeeze. Then we told everyone, please, everybody set a goal on cost consciousness. What are the costs that you can save for the company this year? Set a goal. And we talked about it for a long time, 3, 4, 5 days, and everyone wrote their goals. And at the end of the cost consciousness goals, they added up to a huge savings for the organization. They added up all the cost consciousness goals, about 5 crores in those days, and for a small organization, 5 crores worth of savings would have happened at the end of the year. In the end, about 3.5 to 4 crores actually happened, but the goals were set with a lot of grandiose intentions. But the point I'm making is that employees also need to be given freedom to set their own goals and their action plans and decide on the course of actions that they need to take. And this is not so easy even in today's day and age. and give increasingly difficult and challenging responsibilities. Many of you might have heard of stretch goals. There's something called stretch goals that the person is capable of producing 100 units of output, you make it 110. So give a little stretch. You need to challenge yourself and progressively progressive goals. I heard this word in the morning, a webinar I attended. Set a progressive goal for yourself. You say, but till how long? I mean, no, human potential is huge and unlimited. You can keep setting progressive goals every month and every day. You can challenge yourself even more to that. And we're talking about fitness. So you can challenge your fitness to any level. So set progressive goals. More things that can be done to improve role efficacy and role centering is create opportunities for a person to feel that, yeah, I can influence others. My job has a potential to influence others. And if I don't feel I have any influence in the organization, then I feel disempowered and disenfranchised, and that's not a nice feeling. And that impacts my role efficacy. So these are some of the ways in which you can delegating, giving feedback, be willing to accept employee mistakes, etc. More role centering can happen by encouraging personal growth, investing in people development and learning and growing, and delegating increasingly difficult and challenging tasks, appreciating, recognizing. People feel a sense of contribution and a sense of growing, learning and growing in the job. And in fact, one person who was a colleague at one stage in one of my organizations, I said, I left the company and then 10 years later, he's still there. I said, how come you stayed on so long? And I said, as long as I'm learning and I'm contributing, I have no hassle. I love to learn, I love to contribute. And those are my, again, goals in life. So as long as I'm learning and contributing, so I feel I'm growing. So role centering is important. What can be done to improve role efficacy in terms of linkages of roles? There is inter-role linkage. This is now where a lot of role clarification comes in, and I will talk about the role clarifications I've done for some consulting cases that we've done over the years. And encourage employees to seek and render cooperation from others. Interdependence, the linkages are very crucial. When you get out there in organizations, people cannot afford to work in silos. They have to break the silos. You have to get them to collaborate with each other and encourage employees to solve problems working in cross-functional teams and across departments and with their peers and their superiors. Encourage employees to respond to requests from other departments. If some finance guy is asking for some data from HR, okay, here it is. I mean, don't think of it as an infringement of your job, or he's going to now take away time from what I have to do. It's also your role to help others and to respect that interdependence that is coming in. Encourage them to seek help from their peers, superiors, and others. There's nothing wrong with creating coalitions and collaborations in the organization and seeking help of employees for organization decisions. So participative management. Role linking is enhancing role efficacy if there is some degree of superordination in the manner in which the role is executed. So you can share organization vision, goals, and plans. So if I can link what I'm doing with what my organization is achieving, then I'm much more motivated. I don't know how many of you have, I can now stop and tell a little story, but I think you might have heard the story of a man who was breaking stones. And one man who's breaking stones says that, oh, I'm in hard labor, I'm working too hard, and I'm tired at the end of the day. I have dirty job to do, and it's manual hard work, and it's difficult. Another man is breaking stones. He says, hey, this is a great work because, I have to break these stones, so I have to make a perfect wall, and the wall has to meet all the standards of perfection. And therefore, I've got a, really challenging task that the stones have to be broken in a particular manner and perfectly. Okay, and it's not bad, but I'm pursuing excellence. Same job. And a third person breaking stones, and it's the same job he's doing first, second, and third person breaking stones. And when he's asked, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm building a temple, you know, or I'm building a place of worship to the God I believe in. And I'm totally thrilled because this stone is going to make this wall and this wall is going to make that temple. And I'm totally thrilled at the end of the day. Wow, I've had a role to play in the building of that temple. So the difference is the same job. In one case, there is a high degree of superordination. In one case, there is no. I'm just doing my day's work. So it helps to see the linkage of what you're doing with where the organization is going, what is being built and what is being learned. I once had a student who came to me and said, after a year, I'm disillusioned. So I said, what happened? Let's bring out the champagne, let's celebrate. No, I'm disillusioned, I'm in pain, and you're saying, let's celebrate. I said, yeah, it's what fun. I said, why? I said, that means you got rid of your illusions. Now tell me, what is the reality you're experiencing? So he says, you know, I'm supposed to be I've done all this marketing course and all here in NMIMS. I'm supposed to be a, you know, customer service officer. And they put me in the complaints department, and all I'm doing is sending faxes, receiving phone calls, listening to customer complaints. And it's nothing, you know, I'm doing no job of customer service. I'm not learning anything about customer experience. I said, look at you, you've got a great chance to learn everything about customer experience because you're in direct touch with disgruntled customers. And think of what you're learning, think of the bigger picture that you're achieving in handling customer complaints. You know, and this will be one experience that will never fall you short in the long run. So he started looking at his job with the bigger picture in mind and said, okay, that makes sense. Yes, let's take out the champagne. But sure enough, you know, organization, vision, goals, plans are so important at at the lowest levels in the organization. It's so important to understand. And that's what role linking, superordination is about. So I'm going back to this interlocking circles diagram. It's supposed to be interlocking circles. And I'm telling you that the organizational roles, and we've looked at all the things that can be managed by an OD manager. All the role linking, all the role efficacy that can be managed. These are all things that are outside the individual. These are all things that as an OD manager, I can set up and create all these things and improve his role efficacy. But I would be foolish to say if I've done all that, I've done my job. Behavioral dynamics is much more complex as compared to that. There is an inner individual that needs to be addressed also. Inner individual that needs to be addressed. Now, different people come with different orientations. Some are habitually compliant. So they'll do as they're told. And they'll meet all expectations. And they'll be the apple of their boss's eyes. Some people will be the ones who will take it to the next level. And they will challenge the existing status quo. And they will say, this needs to be challenged. And let's look at how can we do it better. Let's look at solving all the problems. And let me tell you, this is how I would do it if I wasn't. So they're adding themselves to the roles. Some people will rebel and say, hey, nothing over here works. It's all rubbish and everything is bad here and it's not working. And they will just sit with in a habitually rebellious position. Some people will be very maverick. They'll be around doing their job, but you really don't know what they're achieving. And one fine day, some big achievement will pop out and one great idea will pop out and that will change the entire status quo and take the organization to the next level in performance. These are maverick characters. Okay, so every individual comes with their own propensity to engage with the role. So I can set up the entire role efficacy the way I've just explained to you. Many initiatives, I'll come to those also. But I would not be doing my job fully unless I have also looked at the person or the person occupying the role, the individual personality, his needs. And so looking inside is as important as looking outside. I can set up all the system, structure, culture, process outside, but what is it about looking inside the individual inside here. So I'm going to give you one small framework that also impacts the role dynamics and the role efficacy. And I've loosely termed this self-system dynamics. So there's a system, there's an organization, a system, set of rules, regulations, processes, people, culture, processes, all that, you know, values, ways, traditions of doing things. The whole tribe is out there. The system is the tribe. Okay, and I'm who I am. So how I locate myself vis-a-vis that system is important. How do I locate myself vis-a-vis that system is important to understand, and is a framework to help us understand. So some people, I once had a student who said, you know, I only want to be a good son and a good executive and a good father to my children and a good brother to my sister. I just want, his commitment was entirely to his role. I want to discharge all my roles very well in my life. And some people are the kind whose commitment is to who they are. No, I believe I have something to achieve in life. I came here with a purpose, and I will do what I came here for. I will do what I came here to do. And I will find appropriate contexts that will fulfill my wish and fulfill my dream. I will create my own context for my wish and my passion fulfillment. So some people have committed to the role more and to themselves less. Some people have committed themselves to themselves more and their role less. So where does the commitment lie on this axis? Is the commitment to myself? Is the commitment to my role? And where on this axis does it lie? That's important to understand. And there is a situation. So given a situation, how do I act? Depending upon, so if there's a fire burning, will I say, no, I'm not supposed to do, I'm not a good firefighter. So therefore my identity says I'm scared of fire, so I'll run away. Or the situation demands that, no, I discharge my role, I call the fire brigade and I do whatever it takes to put out the fire. So there are situations that come up that challenge the roles of people. And there is who am I? Now, based upon this dynamic, these 2x2 metrics, if a person's commitment is to himself and he's doing what he wants, then we call it self apart from system. This guy is a maverick. I'm apart from the system. I'm not a groupie. I'm a lone ranger. I operate on my own. And I may be there in the team, but I'm not really a team player. I'm not very visible there. I still am more of a solo player. So he's a maverick character. Okay. Sometimes I'm self for the system. Okay. I am not who I am, but I'm there. I'm available to the organization, and I will bring my best capabilities to the organization. But I will demand my price. I will demand my price, and the price has to be given to me because it's for me. It's not, I put myself above the organization. So self for the system. I exist for the organization. And it's a very mercenary kind of, I'm there for myself, but I'm available to as a bundle of talents to the organization. As long as a lot of millennial people in both these categories, a large number over here. Okay. And then self from the system. These are people who say, I'm in it for myself. These are like many of the politicians today. They are very selfish. They say, look, I'm here to extract what I can from the organization. If the organization wants something from me, they have to do something about it and extract from me. And then there's some who are self in the system. I'm nothing but a cog in the wheel. I'm going to do whatever I'm told. I'm going to act as I'm asked to. So this is self like a cog in the wheel. And there's some who are self and system simultaneously. Locate themselves here. That I am who I am. I have my capabilities and competencies. And depending on the situation, I'm discharging those. And I'm a part of the system. I'm also apart from the system. And I carry the system forward. So as an OD manager, it's important to recognize the different kinds of self-role, self-system dynamics that impact the role-taking, role-making, and role efficacy. So if you've got everybody over here, a large chunk, and a lot of millennials are here, all your employee engagement initiatives will not work. You may have these great places to work, you may have Gallup and Strengths, Quest, all those lovely initiatives. You may happiness index, nowadays happiness is a big OD initiative. Happiness is a big, but if everybody is over here, they'll only get more and more cynical, isn't it? Especially young millennials. What is this happiness, you want? Why are we being manipulated? Okay, so unless people are here, all your efforts of role making, role taking will go haywire. So a lot of effort needs to be done to align people first with the system. A lot of effort is to be made to align them. So it's important to understand that role efficacy cannot be created out there unless you work in here. You cannot create as an OD manager, the primary job is to create role efficacy. Sorry. So what do organizations do to create role efficacy? Now, over the years, different fads and fashions have come and different terminologies have come for what they can do. I want to give you an example from Mahabharata. Okay, so we saw as early as 4,000 years ago, there was a need for role clarity. Did you notice that when Sanjay was talking about his, the role of a charioteer, he did not say that my job is to drive a chariot and keep the horses well and, to make sure the king is comfortable and safe. No, he spoke of a higher purpose of a charioteer. He spoke of the role of a charioteer. He did not speak of the job description of a charioteer. He spoke about the duties. Duties are what? Expectations of others. So these are my duties, my kartavya. So there was a role clarity. And, that's when Vidur says, I don't go by what Adhirath is going to recommend. I will go by what my own intellect tells me. And in the next couple of minutes, Vidur does a good analysis of why Sanjay should be taken for the role of a charioteer. So it is a role that a charioteer plays. It's not a job that he does. No job description can ever say that. So how the role is anchored within is very important. And that's why Sanjay gets the job of being Dhritarashtra's charioteer. And of course, later on in the Mahabharata, he has a major role to play because he's the one who gives Dhritarashtra the narrative of what's actually going on on the battlefield, because Dhritarashtra is blind himself. But that's another story. So it's important, not just in 2020, but also in ancient times. I'm not sitting in my office right now because office is closed and it's also a Sunday. And there is a copy of the Arthashastra I have. How many of you have read the Arthashastra? I think every OD manager should read the Arthashastra. Don't read the Mahabharata, read the Arthashastra. Because the Arthashastra has got one chapter full of only job descriptions. Job description of what it means to be what is the role of a king, what is the role of a queen, what is the role of chief superintendent of the army, the senapati, and what's the role of the money, the mint, the guy who makes the money mint and mints all the coins, and the person who supervises the mines. They've got roles of all these people, and they're written like role descriptions. They're not written like job descriptions. Okay, so everyone should read the Arthashastra. I didn't have a copy, otherwise I'd have brought it here and showed you, or I would have given it to you in a classroom if I was sitting in a classroom. But even the Arthashastra. So as early as that time, there was a need for role clarity because people would take on jobs and roles without understanding themselves and also without understanding what the role really demands. And they would make a commitment based upon peer pressure, placement time. I want the best job. I want the dream job. I want the job of company that comes on day one, number one time slot. and you'll end up taking the wrong job person fit. I always say campus recruitment's a time for getting the worst person for the job, not the best person for the job on behalf of, and almost 70 to 80% of management students quit their first job within the first 1 year of getting it. The same job that they fought so hard on campus for. So it's important at the time of hiring person to see what kind of role person fit there is. And the need for role clarity is so paramount. It's so paramount. So what do organizations do? We saw what Mahabharat did, the Mahabharat, the Pandav dynasty did, and the Kaurav dynasty did. We see that first of all, organize, they design organization structures. When you're designing an organization structure, it's important to keep in mind roles that will fulfill the business strategy and the business purpose. Designing the organization, it's not just jobs. Many organizations recruit for the job person fit. Many technologies, targeted and behaviorally anchored interviewing, behavioral event interviewing, behaviorally anchored interviews. They're all designed, recruitment processes are designed for improving the job person fit. They all look at creating, every organization has job descriptions, almost every organization and have a job description for you. And then they'll also tell you this job description is not everything. They'll give you a job description and say this is not everything, this is only part of what is to be done, and it's just an exercise we did. But it is a part of the role. It at least gives you some clarity on what things you have to do and, processes you're a part of. And then job descriptions have to be rewritten every few years, It used to be every 5 years, but now it's every 3 years. And now every time the organization undergoes a merger and a transformation, job descriptions keep evolving all the time. Organizations do onboarding activities, and you have to design onboarding activities in a way that increase role clarity and self-role integration. You have to design the onboarding activity is not just something that you just familiarize them with all the operations of the company. It is much beyond that. I can do one more lecture only, and I'm sure you had lectures only on onboarding. Every year or every quarter or every month, sometimes nowadays, many IT companies are doing monthly goal setting. But you sit down and you review performance and assess every month and set goals for the next month. You do the planning, and Monday morning meetings, you review what goals were achieved, what were not achieved. So the goal setting gives you some clarity. Okay, these are things we have to do, and now how do we do these? And these are achievements we have to, deliverables we have to. And then the goal setting, how do I apply myself? So this all increases the self and role integration. It gives you more clarity. Performance feedback. I think feedback is much needed, much underused tool. Even 39 years into working life, I feel this way. In the beginning, it was no feedback at all, but even now many companies, they do no proper feedback process. There's a process, but it's just namka vaste. In reality, people don't get much feedback on how they performed and how they actually did and how they fitted in and how they discharged their roles, their responsibilities. So feedback is a very important part of getting clarity on the roles. Mentoring initiatives, performance reviews, sorry. All PMS is designed to enhance the way in which you fit with the system and with the organization, increase your role efficacy. Mentoring initiatives, many companies have a mentor assigned, especially to younger managers. And the mentors kind of inculcate the organization culture in you, and they inculcate, enhance your sense of clarity and efficacy of what you're doing. Employee engagement initiatives, today there are thousands, but there are two kinds of employee engagement initiatives. One is the kind of thing that, provides pep talks and, motivation, external hygiene factors, and they call it employee, the cultural show, variety, entertainment, and talent competition, and that, holy celebration or Navratri Garba. And that is not, to me, employee engagement. That is just social activity. Actual employee engagement is the way a person engages with his role in the organization, with the purpose with which his role is designed, and how that role integrates with the larger purpose of the organization. So the actual definition of engagement, I've written a set of 6 articles on employee engagement on the SHRM blog. I can send you a link if you are interested in knowing what are the contours of employee engagement that organizations need to look at. And nowadays, more and more, we are having coaching conversations. And as I'm evolving more and more in my professional life, I'm having more and more coaching conversations with individuals and anchoring their roles in their own leadership in the organization. So it's all about anchoring your roles and how you play and discharge that role. And it's now 4:20, so I'll spend next 5-10 minutes on some of the consulting cases that we did. There was a company, it was in the pharmaceutical space. They used to have a manufacturing facility in Thane, just outside Mumbai. They had, as a part of a global exercise, it was not local exercise, a part of a global exercise, the company was closing down a lot of the manufacturing facilities and outsourcing the manufacturing to third-party manufacturers. There was a big wave of this that happened at one stage in the pharma business. So this was what was the context. And there were 8 third-party manufacturers had been identified to set up to outsource the manufacturing facility. Some of the people, engineers who were on the production line, 8 of them were selected, and they were to discharge the role of business manager to manage the outsourcing process. So they were normal production engineers. They knew how to keep track of production, how to manage the production facility. It was a continuous process industry, so they understood everything about the chemical process, the manufacturing process and all. And here now they have to be a business manager. They have to manage that third-party manufacturer as a business manager, which meant a completely. So it was a new role of a business manager. And no one in the organization had ever done this kind of a role before. Even the organization themselves didn't know what the role of the business manager would be, how it could evolve. They just looked at their best production engineers whom they didn't want to let go. Otherwise, most of the factory staff was being let go. And they just kept these people. So we did a lot of work with them on role clarification for a business manager and helped them handhold till they got onto the new job. So there was a group of 8 business managers, the new guys. There was a group of third-party manufacturers, people from the HR there. There was a group of the HR department here. There's a group of operations head. And all these people, we worked with these groups to identify what are the dimensions and expectations from this business manager. And what are the expectations, what are the role. And there was a full 2-week exercise where I sat down with each of these groups of people and we thrashed out what is a business manager going to do. And then we brought everybody into a room for 2 days and we did what was called a role clarification workshop for them. And the role clarification workshop examined all the interfaces, all the deliverables in each other, some do's and don'ts and some duties, responsibilities. And then the business managers themselves did their own brainstorming. And then at the end of the workshop, there was a lot of mental preparedness. Okay, these are the expectations from my job as a business manager. Having done that, then there was a period of 3 months of hand-holding, where every fortnight one meeting, every fortnight a meeting with each of these would help them, understand the nature of the transition they had to make. New skills they had to learn, new relationships, new ways of doing things, new problems would crop up, and we'd literally coach them to overcome some of those transition issues. So this was one organization where role clarity was achieved for the role of a business manager in an organization. Now this was just for 8 people. This was one person's role clarity we worked with, and that hundreds of cases. I'm only giving you as an example because this is a very frequent requirement. This comes very often from our clients. There was an operations head. He was literally a factory manager, plant manager, and they wanted to make him a director of operations because the new old director of operations was retiring and he was leaving, and they wanted to make him. So there was a lot of, first we did leadership assessments, and then we tried to understand his potential. And although he was more an operational person, less strategic thinker, very technology driven, not so much a people person. And we did a lot of transition coaching to help him understand how his job is changing, how his roles are changing, and help him fit in. And this was done over a period of 6 months. This coaching was done. And so this was also providing role clarity. And it may appear as if some of the things we talked about before are not relevant here, but we did a lot of that stuff was actually applicable over here. Yeah, this was another one we did. You know, in pharmaceutical companies, there's a medical sales representative. He's going around literally from doctor to doctor, selling, introducing him to the products of the organization. And then they had to be promoted to district managers, and these new promotees had all the other medical representatives reporting to them, and their peers suddenly became their subordinates. And many of you may not know, but till even today, you know, the medical sales represent a highly organized body of white collar workers. So they highly organized. There used to be very terrorized unions, but now it's not so bad, but they're very highly organized. And there's a lot of guidelines that they follow in terms of their profession, do's and don'ts. So these were people who were doing things, now had to manage others who were doing things. So they had to manage others who were doing things. So that's when a lot of role clarification exercise was done again with them in similar way. So it helped to improve the potential, the efficacy with which they went to their new jobs. This was something we did last year. This was a public sector bank, and you know, public sector banks, they have thousands of branches all over the country. And when the branch managers get promoted, they get promoted to the job of a regional head. The regional head has something like 100 to 150, maybe more branches reporting to him. So the degree of complexity between a branch manager's job and a regional manager's job, the degree of complexity changes dramatically. It changes hugely. It's like a big paradigm shift. No matter how many years you spent as a branch manager, nothing can prepare you for the role of a regional head. So we did role clarification exercise where we sat down and examined each of the interfaces of a regional head. There was a job description. Job description was available in the bank. And that job description, if I looked at it, I would run away. That's my role. Oh my God, I'm going to run away, because it was like it was little like a PhD thesis. It was like that thing, you know. So we studied a lot of the regional heads. I went around talking to a lot of regional heads. What is the job you do? What's the role? How do you interface? And what are some of the challenges? What are dilemmas? So we interviewed 3 or 4 regional heads, nearby, and then designed the input for them. And we did some role clarification to start with. And then we did some training through what I had written for them, specifically written for them, an in-basket exercise that simulated the role of a regional head. So we did some training for them that helped them understand, okay, these are the things that we deal with. How do we prioritize? What is important? What is not? We got them into group discussions to sort out that in-basket as well. And then after those workshops were over, we also did coaching to help them transition to their new roles. And in the same bank just now, we had some, okay, I'll not share that experience because that is still not completed. So I wouldn't like to share that right now, but that's still underway. So this is the way we provided role efficacy for the new promotees. There was something like 30 of these in the organization. So we provided some role efficacy for the regional heads. So I'm using a term which I didn't use so far called role clarification. So what do we mean by role clarification? Because unless I'm clear as to what my role is, you saw in the Mahabharata case, he was completely clear. Sanjay was completely clear as to what is his role as a charioteer. But unless I'm clear in my mind, if I'm not clear in my mind as to what to expect when I get to that role, I won't be able to execute it. So these are some of the things we do when we clarify roles. We do the role clarification exercises. Help them develop a clear understanding of role, purpose, functions, and processes. Understand the role holders' roles and responsibilities, how they can contribute, and identify the strengths and needs and establish a plan for improvement. There's some little questionnaire available to understand how to assess your own role clarity. So if you ask these questions, you get a pretty good idea as to how clear this person is on a particular, in their roles. These are, for that same PSU bank, these are some of the interfaces, role interfaces we examine. So how does a regional head interact with the HR manager, and what are some of the do's and don'ts there? How do I, what are the boundaries I need to create over there? And same with all the other role interfaces. And some more questions that help them be more clear on their roles. And these are some more questions. So, sorry, this slide was my working slide. It landed up here. Okay, so thanks a lot. That brings me to the end of my session here. And I hope this has been a good masterclass. Now I will stop screen share and turn on. You suggest we look at question and answers on the chat window, or should we unmute everybody and everyone can ask?
Ma'am, people will unmute and ask the questions.
Okay, whoever wants to ask a question can please unmute and allow everyone to ask questions. Yes, please.
Hello, ma'am. This is Sudipta. I want to ask you that whenever you, when you start with an individual and on an individual level, role clarifying or showing the bigger picture to somebody about their role, what is the, basic level of understanding that you get from the people? Like when you, because everybody is going to be different.
Yes.
And what is the challenges that that you face initially to do that? At what levels? Or an OD professional as we will face, you think, while doing so?
Well, the biggest challenge I would say is to get people to, is to encourage people to think along these lines. Many of them are, many of them are quite, I would not use the word egoistic, but I can't think of any other one. Many of them are so full of themselves, they feel, oh, we'll get there and we'll do whatever we have to do. We'll mumble through, we'll find our way, and if we get caught, we will cover our backside, and So helping them see, initially you have to break through that barrier. Yeah. Help them articulate and see for themselves, okay, this is what I have to do. So 8 out of 10 people, I would say that's a challenge. And some places it happens, it just melts into we go with the flow, and some places it doesn't. So recently I was actually coaching 8 candidates for a very senior level position in a bank. I can't share that part, but they're very, very senior people, and they were like, out of 8, I would say at least 6 were very open and inclined to learn and willing to move on and explore for themselves. But I would say 2 of them were quite resistant, and they were there just because they've been asked to be there.
Okay, that Yes, I understand.
So getting past that.
Ma'am, Himanshu here.
Yes, Himanshu.
I have two requests actually.
Yes.
One is this idea of role dynamics comes into play when you know yourself better. So can you guide us with the approach or tools we can apply on own self to understand ourselves better? And secondly, the psychological front. Can you suggest some good reads for the psychology, understanding psychology from the perspective of the OD practitioner?
Uh, I don't know which are your textbooks, French and Bell, and what is your textbook? Standard OD textbook? French and Bell?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am, we refer them from time to time. But mainly we take research papers and study based on that.
Okay, so from an OD practitioner's perspective, there is one is of course the French and Bell, which is a classical textbook which speaks about nature of change and change management and change interventions. And then there are books which are on different kinds of interventions. So Balanced Scorecard as an intervention and performance management, or Strengths Quest as an intervention, or Great Places to Work as an intervention. So these are some of the methodologies that you will need to learn and be current with. And then there are some books which are on the process aspect of consulting. So there is DIMOC, which is Intervention and Collaboration. That's a very good book that speaks about how change is created in organization. It's called Intervention and Collaboration by DIMOC, D-I-M-O-C-K. I don't know if it's available or not, but it's a book that I would go to very often. And then there is Alan Weiss has got a book on process consulting that's good. Then there is Complete Facilitator's Handbook, which I think is a brilliant book also. How to facilitate individual and organizational level change. What are facilitation skills? So these are books, but books only get you so far. They get you so far. They give you an understanding, they're great. And then when it comes to actually dealing with the situation, sometimes you have to, I always say, I might have to dumb down. That's my term. I have to dumb down to deal with reality, you know. So at times you have to dumb down to deal with reality. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it answers the second part of your question. The first part of your question was, how do you know yourself better? One tool is, I'm graduated in psychology before I went to XLRI. And I think one thing it really put into me was the art of self-reflection. The art of self-reflection is the best way to know yourself, to understand your responses to situation. But with reference to others in the and the others around you, friends, family, you know. So otherwise you would be doing thinking in an ivory tower, unless you're Gautam Buddha or something like that. You know? So self-awareness comes mostly through self-reflection, because no one else can tell you who you are in the final analysis. Others can tell you who you are, but you don't have to buy it, because half the world will tell you you're great, half the world will tell you you're not so great. Much of that will be colored with their own perceptions about you. Much of it will be judgmental, passing judgment on good, bad, beautiful, ugly part of you. And then it will be received by you with that filter and with your own filters on. And you won't realize that you got very confused in what you took in and what you didn't take in. And you took in the wrong things and you didn't take in the right things. And then you reacted to all the situations. So the best tool is self-reflection for any person, any OD practitioner. That would be my answer for you.
Thank you.
Hi, ma'am. This is Aman here.
Yes,
I wanted to understand from your perspective, if say tomorrow I am in an organization and my leaders want to understand if in fact there is some role confusion among the people, then what are some of the flags that I ought to look out for?
when you feel the initiative is waning, you feel the initiative is waning, where people, when people don't know what to do, they prefer not to do anything. You feel people are not taking much initiative, they're like, you know, sitting more passive, not engaging actively. So even your Gallup surveys will show lower levels of engagement under one boss and not under another. So people are not engaging well with their roles when there's a higher turnover under one department as compared to another. And it'll come to your mind that perhaps there's no role clarity. Everybody seems to be doing everything, and nobody seems to be doing anything in particular. People are unable to, complete their tasks at the end of the day because they're focused more on doing things rather than, on the role that they have to play. And when people are getting more into operational matters and processes, rather than looking at what the process is serving, and so more compliance mode, then you know that people are not engaging with the role, they're engaging with the job. And that's when, so it'll be pretty apparent that people are not clear about what they're expected to do, and there's low role efficacy. And you guys are starting out on your careers right now, and you may think that, okay, I've learned everything about Gallup and Strengths Quest and Happiness Initiative and whatnot, and now I am ready, but these are passing fads. And tomorrow there'll be another intervention, and then day after there'll be another, and then 5 years later there'll be another, and 10 years later there'll be another. And you have the rest of your career ahead of you. So specialization in one methodology will never serve a purpose beyond a limited time. So always keep in touch with the fundamentals like this one. So no matter whether you're talking about balanced scorecard or whether you're talking about Strengths Quest, you'll know exactly where your fundas lie, and you'll be able to take on any new methodology easily, and you'll be able to adopt new fashions very easily.
Hello, ma'am. This is Avinash.
Yes, Avinash.
So it was a great presentation. I think the concept which you picked is something which was relevant before and which will be relevant going forward as well in terms of the role clarity piece.
Absolutely.
I was just trying to understand this better in terms of, so when, let's say we have done an intervention in terms of understanding as to how the role clarity can be increased. So then is it about making better JDs, or is it about making a more comprehensive document in terms of role clarity? Or is it about having these systems in place in terms of mentoring techniques or some changes in the organization culture? So at what level do we actually intervene when we go to a certain organization?
So culture eats process for lunch. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats process for lunch. And culture eats systems for dinner. Culture trumps everything. So you need to work more with the organization culture. And what is culture? It is the system. It's how the system lives in the minds and hearts of people. So it's the hearts and minds of people, and how the leadership drives it. So it is the first triangle I showed you is the mother. It's the mother, that first triangle I showed you. It's the systems and structure, process, documentation, job description, all that what you said. It's the people, how it lives in the hearts and minds of people and the people who are driving it. And it's the structure, process, and culture. It's the culture of the organization. Okay, so the two options you gave me, I would say are great options, but it's part of the solution, it's not the whole solution. Writing better job descriptions, the job descriptions gather dust on the files, on the shelves. They're never opened. How they're communicated, how they're held in the hearts of people, how it's internally anchored is more important. So what do? We chase some more and more fancy job description. Recently, I've been asked to write a lot of job descriptions, and how I go about writing job descriptions is the old-fashioned way. What we do is when we write job description, we identify job families. And then we send out a blank, we decide on the blank with the HR and say, this is the blank format, and these are the fields it will contain. And then we send out the blanks to people to write their own job descriptions. Write your own job description. People who are occupying a job. So they write their job description. Then we send it to their bosses and we say, okay, this is it. And then we send it to, HR and we say, okay, this is what they've written. So everyone adds their bit. And then we send it back to the individual to vet it finally. And then we review it after that. So I get into the role only at this stage. How do I review it and what is written and how is it written? What's the flavor? And then I go back one more item. So writing a job description is an iterative process, 2-3 cycles before we say, okay, now this job, and the person who's holding the job is anchoring it well by then. So act of writing the job description clarifies the role for him. Yeah. So it's not, then recently I was asked by another company and they invited bids from 2 organizations to write job description. The other guy said, okay, you want job description of this job. He searched the internet and there's some ready-made job descriptions there. 1,000 job descriptions. You just type job description of HR manager on Google, you'll come down with 10,000 job descriptions, maybe 10,000 different job descriptions for the same job. And then they'll say, okay, they'll put it all together, make a nice, mine was 2 pages, that will be 10 pages long job description. Okay. And then they say, okay, this is the job description of an HR manager. And then they tell the HR manager, this is your job description. But it's not anchored inside. It's been just, then it sits in the files and it doesn't get open. It gets read once and it's left there. So, so the point I'm making is not the act of writing a job description, but it's the act of how is it held with the person who's holding the job. And how the conversation come up? How often does the conversation on that come up? And you can add a system and a process because you're dealing with larger numbers. You're dealing with 10,000 employees, 20,000 employees, maybe more. So you can add a process and a system element, you can put it digitization. But it's all about how the human being holds it in the end. So does that answer your question?
Got it, ma'am. Thank you.
It is
yes, ma'am, definitely.
People, structure, and culture. All 3 have to come together. Then only a role happens.
There has to be an interplay of right. Got it, ma'am. Thank you.
And don't all of you OD people never fall into the fallacy that a process is a solution. I know one IT company, and the student came to me, she was studying and she said, I quit my job and came because, they just put me in a location I didn't want to go to and all. And they had this, they didn't even ask my preference for where I'm going to be placed. And they had some allocation committee that did a job mechanically, mapping people's talents with where the talent was needed. And they disregarded people's individual preferences. It didn't work for them. They had to change it eventually. They had to make it more bottom up than top down. So it works only when you take into account.
Ma'am, I had a question. So,
Rahul.
Yeah. So ma'am, great presentation. Really enjoyed it. And so loads of learnings. My question came from the the MNC factory engineers role clarity that you shared. And so it made me think on, so it's one thing to make the person realize that this is your role and these are the expectations that we have. And maybe the workshop gives that person, that engineer, a sense of clarity that what he was doing isn't the most appropriate thing, but this is his role. But it's a whole different thing of changing his behavior, his mindset, and helping him out. And probably you said about the 3 months journey where there were some interventions done for him to adapt to that new role. So, ma'am, my question to you is, in the virtual context, right? We might have a workshop, and for employees to understand their new roles. So as far as the knowledge is concerned, they have it. They get their new role. But how do we help them to create a deeper shift in their mindset, behavior in the virtual context? So any interventions that we could have that we can change people's way of doing work, their roles in a virtual setting in say about 2 or 3 months time?
So this is where coaching comes in. No? This is where coaching, mentoring comes in. So the boss is a mentor. In fact, today we are asked to do a lot of programs on the manager as a coach. So how does a manager adopt more of a coaching style so that performance conversations and conversations about jobs don't happen once a year during appraisal time. They happen every day. It's a matter of everyday kind of relationship. So manager as a coach. So manager adopts a coaching style and create a coaching culture in the organization. That's another OD intervention that's coming. How do we create coaching culture in the organization? We equip managers with skills to coach their subordinates. So it's not just, so in the world of technology driven coaching is much more important today than ever before. If you look at what the ICF, the International Coach Federation, and I'm a PCC certified by them. So if you look at the ICF today, they are talking so much about the need more aggravated today than ever before. Coaching. And a lot of now my coaching, people are coming for coaching, you know, not because the organization has nominated them. They're coming for coaching because they want to learn and clear for themselves where their path lies. So now there's so much ambiguity. And there's associated some anxieties and fears which need to be, and turbulence because of that emotional turbulence that needs to be settled. So more than ever before, and I take the personal coaches mostly in the night, you know, at 10 o'clock after everyone's gone to sleep. I have free time because then I can converse for a couple of hours if required. And most of the nights I'm up coaching people. It's more than ever before now. And you can coach on Zoom. It's equally possible to coach through phone and video. It's equally possible to help people understand where they themselves. Sure. But it's not so much about telling, not so much about telling people as it's about helping people find the answers themselves. In fact, one of the persons I coached in Deloitte, she just wrote for my feedback, she said, "Thank you for not telling us the answers, but helping us get to that point ourselves." You know? I said, I thought that was the best feedback I've ever received.
Hello, ma'am. This is Bharat here.
Yes, Bharat.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me? Yeah, yes, ma'am. Ma'am, when you were explaining the role efficacy and role linkages part, you mentioned how cross-functional roles help build the role linkages and role efficacy within the organization. So I have a question on it. So when we are speaking about, when we are restricting ourselves to plant workers or brick and mortar organizations wherein employees have this, employees are specialists, they are restricted to only one kind of role. They are, say, a plant worker. How can we improve the role linkages when it comes to these kind of brick and mortar roles, this kind of specialist roles?
So I do believe that every an organization is interdependent, entity, like a tribe. You know, if you look at it as a tribe, it's interdependent, and there is no, role that is so isolated that it's only one man show. I remember once I was called on to do an assessment for one of the petroleum companies for process engineers. It was a very high turnover job because people would get trained. It's a public sector petroleum firm. They get trained here and then they get jobs in the Gulf and then they go off to the Gulf. Very high turnover. They spend 2 years with this company and then they get jobs in the Gulf. So they kept hiring and hiring and hiring more and more. So they wanted me to put in some assessment, methodology for them. So I said, okay, tell me what kind of person you're looking for, the psychological dimensions. I said, we want a person who will be a good team player, he'll go along with others, and he'll do well, and he will seek a lot of consensus and blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, then I studied a few. I said, like, can I see a few process engineers and see where they're working and what they're doing? So I went to meet a few process engineers. This guy is sitting in a control room, and there are maybe 1 or 2 other process engineers in the control room. He's fully plugged into all the controls in front of him, and he's got his headphones on, and he's managing all the controls. He's got to make sure none of the parameters go out of sync. I said, you want an introvert for this job, man. You don't want an extrovert. You want an introvert. Someone will be happy to sit there and do the job by himself. He's literally locked down for 8 hours. He gets shift time. He gets time to take a coffee break and, and a lunch break. And that time someone else has to sit in his place. And he has to take split-second decisions at times, So you don't want a team player. You want someone who can, take charge and be on his own. So so the point I'm making is that it's very important to find the fit. Sometimes some roles are in isolation, some roles are higher levels of linkages with others. So it's important to understand that particular role and what kind of linkages it has, and then you find the right person to fit into that role. So if you hire an extrovert, then he's going to flop miserably. He'll run away from that job.
Guys, we can take one more question.
Hello.
Yes.
Ma'am, one more question on the lines of Himanshu that he asked, like around self-exploration. How much do you think like psychology or MBTIs, would help you to even start with like, getting to know yourself better? Or can you just like put it as an anchor in your life?
It's one input. It's one input. It's only one input. Nobody knows themselves fully. So this is one input. I think I have a lot of belief in psychometric tests. Provided they're of the right kind, they're not the gimmicky kind of ones, but they're of proper vintage. I'm myself certified, but now every time I take a test, it doesn't tell me anything new. I said, tell me something new about me, and it's the same old me. It's telling me different words, new tests, new, fashions, but it's telling me the same thing. Someone called me the talent matrix guys, and they say, we'll give you a free assessment. You come and use our tests and recommend them. So I took their assessment. I said, so what's new? So it does the same things. So after a point, yeah, but when you're young, you're, coming into world, and it does provide you some data about yourself.
Okay, thank you.
But again, never let a psychological test tell you something that you're not. Never allow that. It's feedback for you, yes, but it's not going to tell you something that you're not. I don't know. It went off Netflix. It went off Netflix on 17th of August, but I managed to get the last episode before that. The beautiful serial on Buddha, and it's very well dramatized. I thought it was very nice because I don't read ancient scriptures and think I get very bored doing that. But this was very nicely represented, and I watched the whole series of 55 episodes. If you get a chance, because that is the journey of self-discovery. How his context as a prince shaped him, how his relationship with his significant others in his family shaped him, and how he took the decision to venture out and become a sannyasi, and how he achieved the self-realization. It's his journey of self-realization. I thought it was very inspiring, very, very inspiring. So if you want to understand yourself more, try and get your hands on that, or read about his life stories anywhere you can.
Ma'am, thank you so much for the session. It was a wonderful session. We would love to host you in person at this. So we have a beautiful campus in Mumbai. So once the pandemic and everything settles down, we'd love to have you over there.
I'll come with come with a chalk with the ideas, and we'll create our topic for the day.
We'd love to have you over there. I would like to call upon Aman to present the vote of thanks to Dr. Anita. Aman, please go.
Thank you, Bharat. Thank you for the prelude. On behalf of the entire OD clan, Dr. Anita, I would like to extend our gratitude for making this Sunday afternoon really insightful one for all of us. I'm sure all of my colleagues in the class have their own takeaways from this session. For me personally, it was the moment when you shared about getting to know yourself, getting to know your own role in your life, or all the multiple roles. I think I would like to have a self-reflection on that and get some clarity on that. So thank you for that, giving me a sense of direction. I would also like to hope that you also had a fun time interacting with all of us. And I hope that this marks the beginning of our long-term relationship. So thank you once again from the entire OD clan. And we hope to see you soon, very soon.
Thank you. Let's hope this COVID goes away. Yeah. And let's hope we meet again. And teaching is my first passion. And I would take any opportunity to come with you anywhere. When I was teaching actively, I used to take my students for a lab, personal growth lab. I am a fellow of Somedhas Academy, and Indira Parekh, Pulin Garg from Ahmedabad, they were the ones who founded this process work methodology. So that was a intervention of understanding, exploring oneself, unstructured way, in unstructured and unlimited, no boundaries. That's where my work, I used to call those lab open spaces labs. And that's why my company is called Open Spaces, because I do believe that there needs to be unlimited, no boundaries to your thinking and understanding. And of course, some boundaries to normal behavior and etiquette are there, but other than that, there's no limit to human potential. So with that, I'll close. Thank you so much for your lovely, warm words of thanks. And I'll stop the recording and I'll end the meeting. Is that it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am. Thank you so much.
Love the session.
Thank you,
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have a good day.